Have you ever felt trapped? Not by walls or bars, but by the people who are supposed to love you. This is a story about a woman who fought her way out of a life someone else had planned for her. It's a story of love, unimaginable betrayal, and a secret that was nearly fatal. Prepare yourself, because the truth is often more terrifying than any lie, especially when it's hiding in your own home. Chloe grew up in the small town of Havenwood, a place tucked away in the rolling hills where everyone knew your name and your business. After her mother passed, her father Mike, a good man worn down by grief, married Brenda. Brenda saw their family farm, not as a home, but as a gold mine. She expanded the fields and filled the barns, working Chloe to the bone, while Mike slowly faded, finding comfort at the bottom of a bottle. Chloe's only escape was her friendship with Liam, the boy next door, whose easy smile was the one thing that made Havenwood feel like home. Her dream was to get a scholarship, go to college, and become a paramedic, a future that seemed to shrink with every new demand from her stepmother. The fluorescent lights of the college library hummed, a stark contrast to the frantic buzzing in Chloe's mind. She was cramming for her paramedic finals, a future she had fought tooth and nail for. The dorm's public phone rang down the hall, a shrill, insistent sound. The resident assistant's voice echoed. "Chloe, phone call for you. It's urgent." Urgent. The word sent a spike of ice through her veins. Usually it was her stepmother, Brenda, calling to complain about the farm. She walked down the long, sterile hallway, her footsteps unnervingly loud. She picked up the receiver. "Hello." A man's voice, a familiar one from the Havenwood town office, sounded strained. "Chloe, it's about your father and Brenda. There's been an accident." The world tilted. The humming of the lights became a deafening roar. They were driving to Northgate. The truck went off the road into a ravine. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. They didn't make it." The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor. The future she'd been studying for dissolved into an incomprehensible fog of static. Her knees gave out and she slid down the wall, the world reduced to a single, silent scream. The funeral was a blur of black suits, hushed condolences, and the cloying scent of lilies. People murmured about what a tragedy it was, how Mike had finally seemed to be turning a corner, how Brenda, for all her faults, was a hard worker. Chloe stood by the two graves, a hollowed-out statue in a cheap black dress. The only person who broke through the fog was Liam. He hadn't changed much since he'd joined the army, just broader in the shoulders, and with a sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own. He stood beside her, a silent, solid presence. That night, at her now empty and eerily quiet farmhouse, they sat on the porch swing. A bottle of whiskey passed between them, the burn a welcome distraction from the ache in her chest. "He was getting better, you know," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Brenda said he'd stopped drinking." Liam just nodded, his hand finding hers in the dark. The shared grief was a powerful, intoxicating thing. One drink turned into another, and soon the space between them vanished. It wasn't love. Not then. It was a desperate, messy collision of two lonely souls trying to feel something other than pain. Chloe woke to the merciless morning sun and the sharp, pounding regret of a hangover. The sheets were tangled around her, and beside her, Liam was fast asleep. A wave of shame so powerful it made her sick washed over her. This was wrong. It was a mistake born of grief and whiskey. She slipped out of bed, her movements frantic and quiet. When Liam stirred, she was already dressed, her back to him. "Chloe?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling. "This was a mistake. We shouldn't have—" Liam's face hardened with confusion and hurt. "A mistake. Chloe, we—" She couldn't face him. She couldn't face what they'd done in the house where her father had just been mourned. "I have a boyfriend in the city, Liam. I have a life there." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. "I have to go." She grabbed her bag and practically ran out the door, not daring to look back at the one person who had ever felt like home, leaving him in the ruins of their shared history. Back in Northgate, Chloe tried to piece her life back together. Her boyfriend, Mark, was an accounting student she'd met in a statistics class. He was nice, predictable, safe. He lived with his mother in a pristine suburban house that smelled faintly of lemon polish and disapproval. Mark's mother was a woman who spoke in polite, cutting remarks. "Oh, so you're the little farm girl," she'd said, upon meeting Chloe, her smile never reaching her eyes. "It must be quite a culture shock for you in the city." After the funeral, Chloe sought refuge there, but found only judgment. "It's a shame about your inheritance," Mark's mother commented over a dinner of dry chicken breast. "All that land. But I hear there are debts. It's always the way with those types of people." Mark just sat there, meticulously cutting his food, avoiding Chloe's gaze. Chloe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She realised with sickening clarity that she was just a calculation to them, an asset or a liability. She wasn't a person, just a number on a balance sheet. The final straw came a week later. Chloe was on the phone with the lawyer handling the estate, her voice low as she discussed the farm's significant mortgage. When she hung up, she found Mark and his mother in the living room, their hushed conversation stopping abruptly. Mark's mother gave her a tight-lipped smile. "Chloe, dear, Mark and I were just talking. He has met a very suitable young woman from a good family. You understand, I'm sure. You have complications." The word hung in the air, cold and sterile. Complications. Her grief, her family home, her entire life reduced to an inconvenience. Mark wouldn't even look at her. He just stared at his polished shoes. "I think it's best if you go," he mumbled. In that moment, something inside Chloe snapped. She looked at his weak chin, his mother's predatory smile, and felt nothing but contempt. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "My house, my farm, my complications are worth more than this entire plastic life." She walked out, the slam of the door, a satisfying punctuation mark on the end of a chapter she was glad to close. She was going home. Returning to Havenwood felt like stepping back in time. The familiar general store, the old town hall, the scent of pine and damp earth in the air. Her farmhouse was just as she'd left it, only now the silence was heavier. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams slanting through the grimy windows. She spent the first week just cleaning, scrubbing away the ghost of Brenda's ambition and her father's despair. She found the town's only clinic was in disarray. The old paramedic was retiring, a cantankerous man who'd been treating the town with a mix of outdated medicine and whiskey. Chloe went to the town supervisor, her new paramedic license in hand. "I want the job," she declared. The supervisor, a man who had known her since she was a little girl, looked at her with a mix of pity and admiration. "It's yours, Chloe. Lord knows we need you." She felt a spark of purpose for the first time since the accident. This was her town. These were her people. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a life here after all. The Havenwood clinic was more of a large closet with a leaky roof. Chloe spent weeks transforming it. She scrubbed it from top to bottom, ordered new supplies, and organised the chaotic shelves. The townspeople started trickling in, first with curiosity, then with gratitude. She treated farmers' cuts, grandmother's blood pressure, and children's fevers with a competence and kindness they hadn't seen in years. She reconnected with her old neighbour Jessica, who was now a single mom after a disastrous marriage. They'd sit on Chloe's porch in the evenings, drinking sweet tea, while Jessica's little girl chased fireflies. "You know, Liam's mum, Susan, said he re-enlisted," Jessica mentioned one night. "Heard he's shipping out somewhere overseas." Chloe's heart gave a painful lurch. She told herself it was for the best. He was a world away, and she had a new life to build. But at night, when the house was quiet, she'd find herself thinking of his sad eyes and the warmth of his hand in hers. It was a memory she tried and failed to push away. Life settled into a rhythm. The sharp edges of Chloe's grief began to soften, replaced by the steady demands of her work and the quiet comfort of her home. She sold off most of the livestock, keeping just enough to manage, and found a surprising peace in the familiar chores. One rainy Tuesday, the clinic door flew open with a bang. A group of rough-looking loggers, caked in mud and smelling of sawdust and fear, half carried, half dragged a man inside. "He's hurt bad!" "A tree limb came down on him," one of them yelled. They laid him on the examination table, and Chloe's breath caught in her throat. It was Liam. His face was pale and streaked with blood from a nasty gash on his forehead. His arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. He was home, and he was broken. The world narrowed to the man on her table, the frantic beat of her own heart, and the cold, sharp scent of antiseptic she automatically reached for. "Everyone out now!" Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting through the panic in the small room. The loggers shuffled out, leaving her alone with Liam and the foreman. Liam was fading in and out of consciousness. "Don't you call the authorities," the foreman growled, his voice low. "This was off the books. We call them. We all lose our jobs. You're a paramedic. Fix him." Chloe's head snapped up. "Get out of my clinic or I'll call the sheriff myself for threatening me. A man could die here." The foreman paled and backed away. She turned her attention back to Liam. The head wound was superficial, but his shoulder was clearly dislocated. She cleaned and stitched the gash on his forehead with steady hands, her training taking over. Then came the shoulder. She knew what she had to do. Bracing herself, she gripped his arm. "This is going to hurt like hell, Liam," she whispered, not sure if he could even hear her. With a deep breath and all her strength, she pulled and twisted. A sickening pop echoed in the room, followed by a raw scream from Liam before he passed out completely. Liam's mother, Susan, arrived in a flurry of panic. Chloe calmly explained the situation, assuring her that while Liam was in a lot of pain, he would be okay. For the next week, Chloe made daily visits to their house to change his dressings and check his progress. The visits were tense and filled with unspoken words. The closer he got to healing, the more distant he became. One afternoon, as she was rebandaging his arm, he finally spoke. "You don't have to come anymore, Chloe." His voice was flat, his eyes fixed on the wall behind her. She knew he wasn't talking about the medical care. A familiar ache spread through her chest. "I want to help, Liam." He finally looked at her, his gaze cold. "You made it clear how you felt. I heard you got engaged to some city guy." Chloe flinched. The town gossip mill was as efficient as ever. Before she could correct him, he delivered the final blow. "Besides, I'm getting married soon." "I have a fiancé." The words hung in the air, a wall of glass between them, and Chloe felt like she couldn't breathe. The news of Liam's fiancé felt like a betrayal, as irrational as that was. A bitter, childish anger took root in Chloe. That weekend, a man from a neighbouring town named Travis started showing up at the clinic with flimsy excuses. He was lanky and quiet, with a hopeful look in his eyes. He wasn't Liam, but he was there. When he asked her to the annual town dance at the community centre, a reckless idea sparked in her mind. "Yes," she said, surprising both him and herself. "I'd love to go." She told herself she was moving on, but deep down she knew she was just trying to show Liam that he wasn't the only one who could. She picked a dress that was a little too tight, put on lipstick, and let Travis lead her into the crowded, noisy hall, her eyes scanning the room for the one person she desperately, foolishly wanted to see. And there he was, standing by the punch bowl, holding hands with a pretty, unfamiliar blonde. The sight was a physical blow. The air left Chloe's lungs. Liam saw her at the same moment. His eyes locked on hers, then flickered to Travis, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The rest of the night became a toxic performance. When the band started a slow song, Chloe grabbed Travis's hand and pulled him onto the dance floor. "I'm not much of a dancer," he mumbled. "You'll learn," she said, pulling him close, her gaze fixed on Liam over Travis's shoulder. Liam watched them, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned down and whispered something to the blonde, who giggled. He spun her around, his arm possessively around her waist. It was a silent, stupid war waged across a crowded dance floor. Fueled by jealousy and heartbreak, Chloe did something she immediately regretted. She stood on her toes and kissed Travis, a desperate, meaningless gesture. When she opened her eyes, Liam and his date were gone. Chloe pushed Travis away. I have to go, she mumbled, leaving him confused on the dance floor. She fled the community centre, the cheerful music mocking her. The walk home under the cold, starry sky did nothing to cool the turmoil inside her. Her front gate creaked as she pushed it open, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. Had a good time? Liam's voice was a low growl. The smell of whiskey was strong on his breath. He grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly tight. What do you want, Liam? She asked, her heart hammering him against her ribs. You were all over him, he slurred, pulling her closer. Is that what you want? Huh? Fear, sharp and cold, began to replace her anger. Liam, you're drunk. Let go of me. But he wasn't listening. He picked her up as if she weighed nothing and carried her towards the old dark barn. Liam, no, please, she begged. But her pleas were lost in the night as he kicked the barn door shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. In the pre-dawn light, Liam slipped out of the barn without a word, leaving Chloe alone in the hay, feeling hollowed out and used. A few days later, Jessica told her that Liam had left town again, taking a long-term logging contract up north. The news barely registered. She felt numb, adrift. Travis, oblivious, continued to pursue her. He was kind, if a bit simple, and his steady presence was a balm on her raw nerves. He came from a poor family in a nearby failing town, and he looked at her and her farm with an undisguised awe. His mother, Sharon, was a hawk-eyed woman who sized up Chloe's property with a calculating stare. Chloe knew it was a mistake, a decision born from pain and loneliness. But when Travis proposed a month later, she heard herself say yes. She told herself it was practical. She told herself she could learn to love him. She told herself that quiet, predictable life was better than no life at all. But every night she lay awake, haunted by a ghost with sad eyes. 2 weeks before the wedding, a wave of nausea hit Chloe so hard she had to grip the kitchen counter to stay upright. At first, she dismissed it as stress, but when the morning sickness became a daily ritual, a dawning, terrifying realization settled in. She was pregnant. A quick, frantic calculation in her head confirmed the timeline. The baby wasn't Travis's. It was Liam's. Conceived in anger and whiskey and regret in the dark of the barn, a storm of emotions warred inside her. Fear, despair, and a fierce, unexpected surge of protectiveness for the tiny life growing inside her. She couldn't marry Travis under this lie. It was a betrayal too great, even for a marriage of convenience. She had to tell him. She found him on the porch, staring out at the fields that would soon be his. Taking a deep breath, she sat down beside him. Travis, she began, her voice shaking, there's something you need to know. I'm pregnant. And the baby isn't yours. Travis stared at her, his face a blank mask of shock. He didn't say a word, just got up and walked to his truck, driving off in a cloud of dust. Chloe spent the night sleepless, convinced the wedding was off, that she would be left alone to face the town's judgment. To her surprise, Travis returned the next morning, his mother Sharon in the passenger seat. Sharon marched into the house, her expression grim. We've talked, she announced, as if she were a general planning a campaign. The wedding is still on. Chloe was stunned. But why? The baby. Sharon waved a dismissive hand. Mistakes happen. It would be a bigger scandal to call it off now. We'll raise the child as our own. No one ever needs to know. The cold, calculated logic of it all made Chloe's skin crawl. They didn't care about her or the baby. They cared about the house, the land, the comfortable life she could provide. She was trapped more completely than ever before. The wedding, a small, joyless affair at the town hall, felt less like a celebration and more like the signing of a contract. Married life was a quiet, suffocating routine. Travis spent most of his days in front of the television, while Sharon took over the house, her presence a constant, critical weight. Soon after the wedding, a new, more aggressive wave of nausea began. It wasn't just in the morning. It was constant, a debilitating sickness that left her weak and drained. She'd drink the herbal tea Sharon insisted on making for her, a special family recipe for pregnant women, but it only seemed to make things worse. "You're looking pale, dear," Sharon would say, her eyes gleaming with an emotion Chloe couldn't quite decipher. "You must be careful. Pregnancies at your age can be so fragile." A seed of suspicion, dark and ugly, began to sprout in Chloe's mind. The sickness felt unnatural. The tea had a strange, bitter aftertaste, and the way Sharon watched her, with that predatory glint in her eyes, made her blood run cold. Her suspicion grew into a gnawing fear. She started pouring the tea into a potted plant on the porch when Sharon wasn't looking. Within 2 days, she felt remarkably better. The plant, however, started to wither, its leaves turning a sickly yellow-brown. The proof was terrifying and undeniable. One afternoon, wanting to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the house, Chloe lay down for a nap on the enclosed porch, hidden from view by a screen of wicker furniture. She drifted off, only to be woken by the low murmur of voices from the kitchen. It was Travis and Sharon. "She's not drinking the tea," Sharon hissed. "I found the pot full this morning. You have to get more of the root, the stronger kind. We're running out of time." Travis sounded whiny. "I don't know, Mom. This feels wrong." "Wrong?" Sharon's voice was sharp as broken glass. "What's wrong? Is that tramp trying to pass off another man's bastard as your heir?" "That boy, Liam, he's back in town. What if she tells him? He could try to claim the child, the farm, everything. We have to get rid of it before it ruins everything. Now go get the root." Chloe lay frozen on the porch swing, her heart a block of ice in her chest. They were trying to kill her baby. The realization was so monstrous, so evil, that for a moment she couldn't process it. She heard Travis's truck start up and drive away. Sharon was in the house. She had to get out. She had to run. But where? The sheriff? What could she prove? It was her word against theirs. They would call her a hysterical pregnant woman. Then one name, one face, pushed through the terror. Liam. He was back. He was the only person who might believe her. The only person who had a right to know. Moving on pure adrenaline, Chloe slipped out the back door. Keeping low behind the hedges, she ran, not towards the main road, but through the woods, the familiar path that connected her farm to his. She ran for her life, and for the life of their child, every snap of a twig behind her sounding like footsteps. She burst out of the woods and into Liam's backyard, gasping for breath, her side on fire. She scanned the area frantic. The back door opened, hiding from someone. It was Liam. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He looked tired, older. The sight of him, safe and solid, broke the dam of her control. A sob tore from her throat and then another, and she collapsed into a heap of pure, shuddering hysteria. He was at her side in an instant, his cynical mask gone, replaced by alarm. "Chloe, what is it? Did he hurt you?" He helped her to her feet, his hands gentle on her arms. "No," she gasped, trying to pull air into her lungs. Worse, so much worse. He led her inside, into the warm, familiar kitchen, where his mother, Susan, was kneading dough. Susan's hands froze when she saw Chloe's face. "Dear God, child, what's happened?" Chloe finally found her voice, and the whole ugly story came pouring out. The lie, the marriage, the bitter tea, and the conversation she had just overheard. When she finished, the kitchen was silent save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Susan had her arms around her, her face a mask of fury. Liam stood by the window, his back to them, his shoulders rigid. "They're trying to kill my baby," Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. Liam turned around slowly. His face was pale, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. For the first time, Chloe saw not the boy she grew up with, or the hurt man she pushed away, but a soldier, cold and dangerous. "Not your baby, Chloe," he said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "Our baby!" He looked at his mother. "Call Frank." Susan nodded, already reaching for the phone. Frank was her new boyfriend, a retired sheriff from Northgate who had moved to Havenwood for a quiet life. It seemed that quiet was over. Liam knelt in front of Chloe, taking her trembling hands in his. "Don't be afraid," he said, his eyes boring into hers. "I'm here now. Nobody is ever going to hurt you or our child again. I swear it." Frank, a man with a calm demeanour that couldn't quite hide his sharp, analytical eyes, listened to Chloe's story without interruption. "The plant is good evidence," he said, "but not enough. The key will be catching them with the herbs." A plan formed quickly, born of Frank's experience and Liam's cold rage. Frank's son, a detective in Northgate, was called in. They would need a warrant. They would need to catch Travis with the herbs in his truck. While they waited, Chloe stayed hidden at Liam's house. Late that afternoon, the trap was sprung. As Travis's truck rumbled down the road from his mother's old abandoned homestead, 2 sheriff's cars blocked his path. They found a burlap sack on the passenger seat, full of the dark, gnarled roots Chloe had described. At the same time, Frank and another officer arrived at Chloe's house with a search warrant. They found more of the dried herbs in a tin at the back of Sharon's pantry. The look of pure shock and fury on Sharon's face as they led her away in handcuffs was a sight Chloe would never forget. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police statements and legal proceedings. Travis and Sharon turned on each other immediately, their greed-fueled alliance crumbling into a mess of bitter accusations. The town was buzzing with the scandal. Chloe was sheltered from the worst of it by Liam and Susan, who formed a protective wall around her. But one morning, a week after the arrests, Chloe came downstairs to find a note on the kitchen table. It was from Liam. "I have to clear my head," it read. "I'll be back, I promise." He was gone. Again. The familiar sting of abandonment was sharp. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't alone. She had Susan, a woman who was already treating her like a daughter, and she had the steady, rhythmic flutter of a tiny heartbeat inside her, a promise of a future that was entirely her own. She placed a hand on her growing belly. "It's just us for now, little one," she whispered. "And we're going to be okay." The months passed in a strange, peaceful blur. Chloe's belly grew, and with it, her confidence. She ran the clinic, managed the farm with help from Susan and Frank, and prepared for the baby's arrival. The trial was short and sordid. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Travis and Sharon were both found guilty of attempted feticide and sentenced to prison. Chloe felt a quiet sense of justice, but no joy. She was simply relieved to close that dark chapter of her life for good. Of Liam, there was no word. Susan would sometimes look at her with worried eyes, but she never pressed. Chloe learned to live with the uncertainty, focusing on the new life she was about to bring into the world. Winter turned to spring, and spring blossomed into a hot, humid summer. One sweltering August afternoon, a sharp, low ache started in her back. It was time. The birth was long and difficult, but the moment she heard that first, lusty cry, all the pain vanished. A nurse placed a tiny, perfect bundle in her arms. "You have a beautiful baby girl," she said, smiling. Chloe looked down at her daughter's face, at the tuft of dark hair and the impossibly small, perfect nose, and the love so fierce and overwhelming flooded her that it left her breathless. This was it. This was the reason for everything. This tiny person was her future. A few days later, a nurse poked her head into the room. "Chloe, you're being discharged. Your ride is here." Chloe smiled, expecting to see Susan and Frank. She gathered her things, bundled up her daughter, and followed the nurse down the hall. The automatic doors to the hospital entrance slid open, revealing the bright, sunny day. And standing there, looking terrified and hopeful in a suit she'd never seen him wear, was Liam. He just stood there, staring, as a nurse gently transferred the baby from Chloe's arms to his. "You're the father?" the nurse asked. Liam nodded, speechless. He looked down into the pink bundle, at the tiny face sleeping inside, and then his gaze met Chloe's over the baby's head. His eyes were filled with 1,000 emotions. Awe, regret, love. "She's so small," he whispered, his voice thick. Chloe's heart, which she had guarded so fiercely, began to melt. "What are you doing here, Liam?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "I'm here to take my family home," he said. He had a new job, he explained. managing a logging crew nearby. He'd left to build a life for them, to be a man worthy of her and their child. He'd been a fool, running away when he should have been by her side. As he spoke, he never stopped looking at their daughter. The anger she had held on to for so long just dissolved. It was hard to stay mad at the man who was looking at their child as if she were the entire universe. He followed her out to the car, where Susan and Frank were waiting with beaming smiles. The ride home was quiet, filled with a new, fragile tension. Liam drove with painstaking care, avoiding every pothole. Back at the farmhouse, he helped her get the baby settled, his movements tentative and unsure, but his devotion was plain to see. That evening, after the baby was asleep, he found Chloe on the porch swing. He didn't sit down. Instead, he knelt in front of her on the old wooden planks. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I have been an idiot. I've run away from the only thing that's ever mattered. I don't deserve you, but I love you, and I love our daughter more than my own life. Please, marry me." Chloe looked at him, at the sincere, desperate hope in his eyes. She thought of all the pain, the betrayal, and the long, lonely months. But she also thought of the boy who was her only friend, and the man who promised to protect her. A slow smile spread across her face. "I'll think about it," she said. She made him wait. For 3 long months, he proved himself. He came over every single day after work, his hands rough from labour, to hold his daughter, to help Chloe with chores, to simply be there. He filled the house with toys the baby was years too young for, and read her board books in a low, rumbling voice until she fell asleep on his chest. He wasn't just a visitor. He was a partner. He was a father. He was home. One evening, as he was showing their daughter, Ali, a picture book, Chloe came and stood behind him. "The answer is yes," she whispered. He turned, his face alight with a joy so pure it took her breath away. The wedding was nothing like her first. It was held in their own backyard, surrounded by the entire town, by friends who were family, and a love that had survived the very worst of storms. As Liam slipped the ring on her finger, he leaned in and whispered, "I promise you a lifetime of happiness." And for the first time in a long time, Chloe knew with every fibre of her being that it was a promise he would keep. Chloe stood on the porch, holding Ali's small hand, as they watched Liam drive the tractor across the field, the setting sun casting a golden glow over everything. Her life wasn't what she had planned when she was a young girl, dreaming of escaping to the city. It was something far more complex, more painful, and infinitely more beautiful. She had faced the darkest parts of human nature, greed, jealousy, and betrayal, but she had also found the best of it in the fierce loyalty of friends and the unbreakable bond of family. She had fought for her child, for her home, and for her own future. She had learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up again and again. Her past was a part of her story, a map of scars that had led her to where she was now, home, safe, and loved. And as her daughter laughed, pointing at the tractor, Chloe knew her greatest adventure was just beginning. In the end, Chloe didn't just survive, she triumphed. She reclaimed her life from those who tried to destroy it and built a new one on a foundation of resilience and love. Her story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope, and that the fiercest warriors are often the ones fighting for those they love. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more tales of strength and survival, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to fight for your own happiness against all odds? I would love to hear your story.